Alright guys, what's up? We're back in the studio again today. Welcome to the uber awesome metal vlog, and today we're going to be talking about thrash metal. Alright, so thrash, in a nutshell, is basically metal with hardcore punk influence. And if you listen to crossover bands, you can totally hear that. Some good examples of crossover bands would be DRI, very early Napalm Death, and early Metallica. With thrash, there's kind of this thing called the Big Four that everybody uses to describe four of the most popular bands in the genre. And those are, in my opinion, in order from most to least popular would be Metallica, gotta be number one. I mean, when most people think of metal who don't know much about it, it's kind of the band they think of. And so it only makes sense that they would be kind of the number one spot for thrash metal. Number two, Megadeth. I think that Megadeth has been huge to the genre. Dave Mustaine was closely related to Metallica, while they were still an up-and-comer. If you don't know that story, it's a read, so you should check that out. And they definitely deserve the number two spot because they're also way, way up there. Number three for me, gotta be Slayer. I think Slayer was a huge deal when they came into the scene. South of Heaven was a very, very influential, not just thrash, but metal album as a whole. And I think if you look at Slayer, you can kind of see where a lot of death metal bands started to sort of get their ideas, and that genre became more cohesive. And the fourth of the big four is Anthrax. And while I think they matter, I mean, they're obviously, if people consider them one of the four biggest thrash bands of all time, then they've got to be kind of a big deal. But I just don't think, it's not even so much that they weren't, it's just that they don't matter as much in comparison to Metallica, Megadeth, and Slayer, because in my mind, when I think thrash metal, those are the first three I think of. Just no contest there. Alright, so how does the song structure work in thrash metal? Well, starting with drums again, you hear a lot of hardcore punk beats. So kind of that just basically really sped up eighth note hi-hat, kick snare beat that you hear in rock and roll music. You just hear that, triple or quadruple time for thrash and hardcore punk. For guitars, there's a lot of virtuosos, I want to say, in thrash metal. Marty Friedman, Kirk Hammett, James Hetfield, Dave Mustaine himself, Kerry King even. All these guys are really, really great guitarists. Like, they can shred when they want to, and that's definitely a big part of thrash metal solos. But what really impresses me, and what kind of the core of guitar playing in this genre is just this kind of dogged endurance almost that it takes to play that fast for that long. Because, as you'll notice, a lot of it is just power chords on the low A and E strings of a guitar. And while this isn't super impressive on its own, when you take it at the tempo they do, it's pretty darn cool. For bass, they usually follow the guitar. There are some bands where the bassist kind of goes off and does his own thing at the same tempo, which in my opinion is just phenomenal. But as a general rule, the bassist will kind of follow the roots of the chords. In less technical terms, the guitarist's first finger, and just pick that low E string just as fast as the guitarists are, which is a feat on bass, especially for guys who play without picks. And you've got vocals in thrash, which in my opinion borrow a lot from punk rock, especially the hardcore stuff, because the vocals are really, really harsh in thrash metal, but not in the kind of low, growly sense you would think of in death metal. But it's really just kind of like barking and yelling, which you get a lot of in hardcore punk if you look to bands like Black Flag, Minor Threat, Bad Brains, Dirty Rotten Imbeciles, etc. They all just kind of shout and really have that harsh vocal, but without actually screaming, as you would call it. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and dive down and focus on one of my favorite bands in the genre, which in this case has got to be Metallica. I mean, come on. Metallica is like one of everyone's favorite metal bands if they like the genre enough, or at all really. That's kind of the stepping stone that me and a lot of my friends got into metal in the first place with, and I think it just goes to show that they're a really cool, really influential group. Master of Puppets is an incredible album. Justice for All is great. Ride the Lightning is awesome. I love their debut album, Kill 'Em All. They've just got, so many albums that are all so great, and like classic examples of thrash metal too, which is fantastic. Kirk Hammett really takes the cake for me. There are other guys who I might be a little more impressed by, but he really knows how to put the right notes in the right places at the right time. And at the end of the day, I think that's what soloing's all about. You've also got James Hetfield's vocals, which I think are just kind of the mortar that holds the whole group together. James Hetfield's vocals are just the right amount of harsh to me, not too much that, you know, it's off-putting to casual listeners or might be unintelligible, but enough that, you're listening to a metal group.